The shot rang out across the dusty street of Sweetwater Creek, Arizona Territory, 1878. As Eleanor Thornton ducked behind a water trough, her heart pounding against her ribs like a wild Mustang. She hadn't expected her first day in this frontier town to involve gunfire. But then again, nothing in Eleanor's life had gone according to plan since her father's passing 3 months prior. Her once comfortable Boston life had evaporated with his debts, forcing her west to claim a small inheritance from a distant aunt, a modest dress shop that now seemed impossibly far across the bullet-riddled Main Street. "Stay down, madam." A deep voice commanded as a tall figure vaulted over the trough beside her, dust billowing from his weathered leather chaps. His face was partially obscured by a bandana, but Eleanor caught the flash of intense blue eyes beneath the shadow of a wide-brimmed Stetson. "Unless you're partial to having extra holes in that fine dress of yours." "I assure you, I have no such partiality," Eleanor replied, surprised at her own composure. "Though I would appreciate knowing why I'm being shot at within 10 minutes of arriving in your charming town." The man chuckled, the sound incongruously warm amid the chaos. "Not being shot at, madam. You just happened between Dixon and Thompson settling their weekly disagreement." He peered carefully over the trough, then ducked back down as another shot splintered the wood above them. "Though their aim seems particularly poor today." "I'm Eleanor Thornton," she said, extending her gloved hand in what felt like absurd formality given the circumstances. "Dane Aldridge," he replied, taking her hand briefly before checking the revolver at his hip. "Most folks call me Dane." "And you've picked one hell of a day to come to Sweetwater Creek." "I wasn't aware I had options for scheduling my arrival, Mr. Aldridge." His eyes crinkled at the corners, suggesting a smile beneath his bandana. "Fair point, Miss Thornton. Now, when I give the word, we're going to make a run for the sheriff's office." "That's it there with the blue door," Eleanor nodded, gathering her skirts. "Ready when you are, Mr. Aldridge." "Dane," he corrected, then counted down. 3, 2, 1 now." They burst from behind the trough, Dane keeping his body partially between Eleanor and the gunfight as they raced across the street. Dust clouded around Eleanor's boots, her trunk abandoned near the stage coach, her carefully planned entrance to Sweetwater Creek dissolving into this mad dash for safety. As they reached the sheriff's office, Dane pushed open the door, ushering Eleanor inside before following. The interior was cool and dim after the bright sunlight, and Eleanor found herself facing a grizzled older man who looked up from his desk with weary resignation. "Another one, Dane?" the sheriff asked, setting down his pencil. "Found this lady taking cover during Dixon and Thompson's latest dispute," Dane explained, pulling down his bandana to reveal a strong jawline peppered with stubble. "Miss Eleanor Thornton just arrived on the afternoon stage." "Sheriff Walter Michaels, madam," the older man said, rising. "Welcome to Sweetwater Creek. I apologize for the reception committee." "Are gunfights a regular occurrence here, Sheriff?" Eleanor asked, attempting to straighten her travel-rumpled dress. "Only on days ending in Y," Dane quipped, moving to the window to peer out at the street. Sheriff Michaels sighed. "Not quite that bad, madam, though I admit those two have been at each other's throats since Dixon accused Thompson of cheating at cards last month." A final shot echoed outside, followed by a crash and angry shouting. "Sounds like they've moved on to breaking furniture," Dane observed. "Progress of a sort. I'd best get out there before they destroy Molly's entire saloon," the sheriff said, reaching for his hat. "Miss Thornton, you're welcome to wait here until things quiet down." "Actually," Eleanor said, finding her voice, "I need to reach Madeline's dress shop. I believe it's my property now." Both men turned to stare at her. "You're Maddie Thornton's niece?" Sheriff Michaels asked, eyebrows rising. "We heard she'd passed and left the shop to kin from back east, but didn't expect." "A woman," Eleanor supplied, lifting her chin. "Such a young one," the sheriff finished diplomatically. "Maddie was well respected here. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you," Eleanor said. "Though I confess I barely knew her. My father, her cousin, corresponded with her occasionally, but I've never been west of the Mississippi until today." Dane's expression was unreadable as he studied her. The dress shop's been closed these past 2 months. It's right next to my livery stable. Another crash from outside drew the sheriff to the door. Dane, can you see Miss Thornton safely to Maddie's place once I've cleared those two fools out of the street? I'd appreciate it. Of course, Dane said, his eyes still on Eleanor. Miss Thornton and I were just getting acquainted. After Sheriff Michaels departed, Eleanor found herself alone with the tall cowboy who had quite possibly saved her life. Up close, she could see that he was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30 or so, with faint lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke more of laughter than hardship. "So you're our new dressmaker," Dane said, leaning against the sheriff's desk with casual ease. "I'm afraid I'm no such thing," Eleanor admitted. "I can sew a basic seam, but my talents lie elsewhere. I was a teacher in Boston before." She trailed off, not wanting to explain her family's financial ruin to a stranger, before life took an unexpected turn. Dane suggested, showing surprising perception. Eleanor nodded. "Something like that. The dress shop was left to me, so here I am, though I confess I hadn't planned much beyond arriving." Dane's mouth curved into a smile that transformed his weathered face. "Well, Miss Thornton, if there's one thing the West teaches you, it's how to adapt." He moved to the window again, then nodded. "Looks like Walter's got those two headed to cool off in separate cells. Shall we retrieve your luggage and get you settled?" Outside, the street had returned to its normal bustle, though people gave a wide berth to the splintered remains of what had once been a chair outside the saloon. Dane efficiently located Eleanor's trunk and valise beside the now departed stagecoach and carried them with apparent ease. "Your shop's just down this way," he said, leading her past a general store, a small bank, and a doctor's office. "Town's grown some in recent years. Silver Strike about 20 miles west brought in new folks, and the railroad's supposed to reach us by next year." "Is that your livery?" Eleanor asked, nodding toward a large stable across from a modest building with Madeline's dress shop painted in faded letters above the door. "It is," Dane confirmed. "Been running it 5 years now. Your aunt or cousin, I suppose, was a good neighbor. Always had coffee brewing on cold mornings." They reached the dress shop, and Eleanor fumbled in her reticule for the key she'd received along with her inheritance papers. The lock turned with a protesting creak, and the door swung open to reveal a dusty interior, fabric-draped forms standing like silent sentinels in the dimness. Dane set her trunk down inside the doorway. "There's living quarters in back, basic but comfortable enough. Maddie kept it nice." Eleanor took a tentative step inside, overwhelmed by the reality of her situation. This small frontier shop was now her home, her livelihood, her future, and she hadn't the first idea how to run it. "It's not what I expected," she admitted softly. "Few things out here are," Dane said, his voice equally quiet. "Would you like me to light the lamps? It's getting on toward evening." Eleanor nodded gratefully, watching as he moved confidently through the shop, striking matches and bringing warm light to the space. As the shadows receded, she could see that beneath the dust lay a well-organized business. Bolts of fabric-lined shelves along one wall, a large cutting table dominated the center, and a gleaming sewing machine sat in the corner by a window. "Your aunt was the only dressmaker for 30 miles, Dane explained as he lit the last lamp. "Ladies from neighboring towns would make the trip just to have her make their Sunday best. And now they'll have me," Eleanor said with a nervous laugh. "A woman who can barely sew a button straight." Dane turned to face her, his expression serious. "If you're planning to sell up and head back east, I won't judge you, but Sweetwater Creek could use a dress shop, even if you have to learn the trade as you go." There was something in his directness that Eleanor found refreshing after the polite deceptions of Boston society. "I have nowhere to go back to," she admitted. "This shop is all I have left," Dane nodded, accepting her words without pity. "Then I reckon you'll figure it out. Folks here are generally willing to give newcomers a chance, even after my dramatic arrival." Eleanor asked, attempting humor to mask her uncertainty, especially after that. "You've already given them something to talk about for weeks." His smile returned, warming his features. "Now you must be hungry after your journey. The cafe down the street serves a decent meal if you'd care for some company. Eleanor hesitated, acutely aware that accepting dinner with a man she'd just met would have been scandalous in Boston. But Boston was nearly 2,000 miles away, and she was starting a new life with new rules. "I would be delighted, Mr. Aldridge. Dane," he corrected again, that smile deepening. "If we're to be neighbors, Miss Thornton, you might as well use my given name. Then you must call me Eleanor," she replied, surprising herself with her boldness. "Eleanor," he repeated, the name sounding different in his deep voice. "Shall we?" As they stepped back into the street, now painted gold by the setting sun, Eleanor caught several curious glances from townsfolk. She lifted her chin, determined to face her new life with courage. "Don't mind them," Dane murmured beside her. "Small towns run on gossip like engines run on coal." "And what will they be saying about me?" Eleanor asked, genuinely curious. "That Mattie Thornton's Eastern niece has arrived, looking like a fine lady and already keeping company with the town's most confirmed bachelor," Dane replied with a chuckle. "By morning, half the town will have us engaged, and the other half will be taking bets on how long you'll last before fleeing back to civilization." "And which half would you bet with?" Eleanor asked, glancing up at him. Dane's blue eyes met hers, unexpectedly serious. "I never bet against a person who has nothing left to lose, Eleanor. Those are the ones who fight hardest to build something new." The cafe was a small establishment with checkered cloths on the tables, and the savory aroma of beef stew filling the air. A plump woman with graying hair hurried over as they entered. "Dane Aldridge twice in 1 week. To what do we owe the pleasure?" Her curious gaze shifted to Eleanor. "And who's your lovely friend, Mrs. Palmer? May I present Miss Eleanor Thornton, newly arrived from Boston." "She's Mattie's niece, come to take over the dress shop." Dane performed the introduction with unexpected polish. "Eleanor, this is Harriet Palmer, who makes the best apple pie west of the Mississippi." "You flatter an old woman," Mrs. Palmer said, though she beamed at the compliment. "Miss Thornton, we've been lost without a proper dressmaker these past months. You're most welcome." "Thank you," Eleanor said, warmed by the genuine greeting, "though I should confess my sewing skills may not match my aunt's." "Nonsense," Mrs. Palmer declared. "You'll have Mattie's patterns and notes, and the ladies hereabouts aren't expecting Paris fashions. We're just glad to have the shop open again." She gestured toward a table by the window. "Now sit, both of you, and I'll bring you the evening special." As they settled at the table, Eleanor found herself studying Dane with new interest. "You seem well regarded here," she observed. Dane shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. "Been here long enough to prove myself useful, I suppose." And before that, his expression shuddered briefly. "Drifted some, fought in the war when I was barely more than a boy, tried ranching for a spell in Texas." He met her gaze directly. "We all have pasts, Eleanor. Out here, most folks don't pry too deep." Understanding that she'd touched on something private, Eleanor changed the subject. "Tell me about Sweetwater Creek. What should I know that isn't in the town's promotional materials?" Dane's posture relaxed. "So they're advertising back east now. Lord help us." "A small notice in a Boston newspaper," Eleanor confirmed. "It promised abundant opportunities for industrious settlers." "Well, it ain't lying exactly," Dane said, his accent becoming more pronounced. "There are opportunities if you're willing to work hard and weather the lean times. Town's growing, like I said. Got a proper school now, church that doesn't double as the saloon, even talk of a real hotel instead of just rooms above the general store." Mrs. Palmer arrived with 2 bowls of fragrant stew and a basket of fresh bread. "Eat up while it's hot," she instructed before bustling away to other customers. As they ate, Dane continued his overview of Sweetwater Creek's inhabitants, the feuding Dixon and Thompson, who'd provided Eleanor's welcome. Doc Harris, who doubled as the town dentist. Reverend Jenkins and his formidable wife, who ran both the church and most town committees, and various other colorful characters. "And what about you?" Eleanor asked as they finished their meal. "How did you come to own the livery stable?" "Won it in a card game," Dane said, then laughed at her expression. "That's what folks around here think anyway. Truth is less exciting. Previous owner was heading to California, needed someone to take over quick. I had some savings from my ranching days and new horses. Made sense." And you've been here 5 years, Eleanor mused. That seems a long time for someone who described himself as a drifter. Maybe I found something worth staying for, Dane replied, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her look away first. The next morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the bedroom windows of the living quarters behind the shop. Eleanor had spent hours the previous evening exploring her new home, discovering her aunt's neat handwriting in ledgers and pattern books, and a small collection of personal items that offered glimpses into the woman she'd never met. After a simple breakfast from the supplies Dane had thoughtfully arranged to have delivered while they were at dinner, Eleanor turned her attention to the shop itself. Dust covered every surface, but beneath it lay potential. She tied on an apron found hanging behind the door and set to work. By mid-morning, she had cleared the front display window and was arranging a selection of finished dresses she'd found in a cedar chest, her aunt's final work, presumably when the bell above the door jingled. "Hello," called a feminine voice. "Is anyone oh?" Eleanor turned to find a young woman about her own age standing in the doorway, her eyes wide with surprise. "You must be Maddie's niece," the woman said, recovering quickly. "The whole town's buzzing about your arrival. I'm Daisy Miller, my father runs the general store." "Eleanor Thornton," Eleanor replied, wiping her dusty hands on her apron. "I'm afraid the shop isn't quite ready to reopen yet." "Oh, I didn't come to shop," Daisy said, stepping inside and looking around with undisguised curiosity. "I came to welcome you. And well, to see for myself if the rumors were true." "Rumors?" Eleanor asked warily. Daisy's smile was knowing. "That Dane Aldridge personally escorted you to dinner last night. He hardly ever takes meals at the cafe, keeps to himself mostly, except for business." Eleanor felt heat rising to her cheeks. Mr. Aldridge was merely being neighborly. We had quite an eventful introduction during yesterday's gunfight. "So I heard," Daisy exclaimed, her enthusiasm undimmed. "Half the town saw him carrying you to safety." "He most certainly did not carry me," Eleanor protested. "We ran for cover together after I was caught in the crossfire." Daisy looked slightly disappointed at this clarification but rallied quickly. "Well, either way, it's caused quite a stir. Dane's the most eligible bachelor in 3 counties, you know, not that he seems to notice or care." Eager to change the subject, Eleanor gestured to the shop around them. "I could use some advice, actually. I'm not much of a seamstress, I'm afraid, and I need to figure out how to run this business." Daisy's expression brightened. "Really? Well, I helped your aunt occasionally when she was busy with big orders. I'm not skilled enough to make entire garments, but I can handle basic alterations and I know how she organized things." "That would be invaluable," Eleanor said sincerely. "I was a schoolteacher in Boston, not a dressmaker." "A schoolteacher?" Daisy clapped her hands together. "How perfect. Our teacher, Miss Winters, is getting married next month and moving to her fiancé's ranch. The school board's been in a panic about finding a replacement." Eleanor blinked, surprised by this potential opportunity. "But I came to run the dress shop." "Why not do both?" Daisy suggested. "School's only in session until 2 o'clock, and mostly just the younger children attend in spring and fall when the older ones are needed for planting and harvest. You could teach mornings and run the shop afternoons." The idea took root immediately in Eleanor's mind. Teaching was her passion, her training. The dress shop was her inheritance, her security. Perhaps she could indeed do both. "Who should I speak with about the teaching position?" she asked. "Reverend Jenkins heads the school board," Daisy replied. "I could take you to meet him this afternoon if you'd like." By evening, Eleanor's head was spinning with the rapid developments. After meeting with Reverend Jenkins and his wife, who had subjected her to a thorough, but not unkind interrogation about her qualifications and moral character, she had been conditionally offered the teaching position, pending approval by the full school board the following week. She was hanging the closed sign back in the shop window after a productive afternoon of cleaning when the door opened again, revealing Dane's tall figure. "Heard you've had quite a day," he said by way of greeting, hat in hand. "Word travels fast around here." "So I'm learning," Eleanor replied, unable to suppress a smile. "Is there anything about me the town doesn't yet know?" "Probably not," Dane admitted with a rueful grin. But for what it's worth, folks seem impressed. Teaching school and running the dress shop is ambitious. It may be foolish, Eleanor said, giving voice to her doubts. I've never managed a business before. You were resourceful enough to come 2,000 miles on your own to start a new life, Dane pointed out. I'd say that bodes well for your chances. His confidence in her was unexpected and touching. Thank you for that, she said softly. I actually came with a purpose beyond gossip, Dane continued, producing a folded paper from his pocket. Found this in my stable loft while sorting some old tack. It's addressed to you. Eleanor took the envelope, noting her name written in an elegant hand. How strange. Maddie must have written it before she passed, Dane explained. She knew you were coming eventually. With slightly trembling fingers, Eleanor opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. My dear niece, it began. If you are reading this, then I have gone to meet our Maker and you have bravely answered the call to claim your inheritance. I regret we never met in life, but through your father's letters, I feel I have come to know your spirit. The shop is yours now to do with as you see fit. Sell it if you must, but I hope you might find, as I did, that Sweetwater Creek offers a chance for reinvention to those brave enough to seize it. Look in the bottom drawer of my desk. The key is taped beneath the top drawer for my patterns and customer records, and know that whatever you decide, you have my blessing. Your loving Aunt Madeline. Eleanor looked up, blinking back unexpected tears. She knew I might not stay. Maddie understood people, Dane said quietly. She'd want you to do what's right for you. I don't even know what that is anymore, Eleanor admitted, folding the letter carefully. 3 months ago, I had my teaching position, a comfortable home, and what I thought was security. Then my father died, and I discovered he'd mortgaged everything to cover gambling debts. Within weeks, I had nothing. Dane was silent for a moment, his blue eyes thoughtful. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find out what you're made of, he finally said. I didn't start over in Sweetwater Creek by choice either, but now I can't imagine being anywhere else. There was a story there, Eleanor sensed, but before she could probe further, he continued. I came for another reason too. There's a town social on Saturday night, dancing, food, that sort of thing. Thought you might like to go. Good way to meet folks outside of business. Are you asking to escort me, Mr. Aldridge? Eleanor asked, a smile tugging at her lips. I believe I am, Miss Thornton, he replied, his own mouth quirking upward. Though I should warn you, my dancing's rustier than an old horseshoe. I would be honored, Eleanor said, though I'm afraid I have nothing suitable to wear for such an occasion. Dane glanced meaningfully around the dress shop. Seems to me you're in the right place to solve that problem. Eleanor laughed, the sound surprising her with its lightness. I suppose I am at that, though I still have much to learn about dressmaking. Town's full of women who'd be happy to advise, Dane said. Daisy Miller, for one. Mrs. Jenkins fancies herself quite the fashion expert too, though most of her knowledge comes from mail-order catalogs. I'll keep that in mind, Eleanor said, touched by his thoughtfulness. And yes, I would be delighted to attend the social with you. Dane's smile deepened, creating those appealing creases at the corners of his eyes. I'll collect you at 7 on Saturday, then. He settled his hat back on his head and turned to leave, then paused at the door. Welcome to Sweetwater Creek, Eleanor. I think you'll fit right in. The days leading up to the social passed in a flurry of activity. With Daisy's help, Eleanor managed to alter one of her aunt's simpler gowns to fit her slimmer figure, adding a touch of lace at the collar for freshness. She spent mornings organizing the shop and afternoons, meeting with potential customers, who, curious about the new dressmaker, began dropping by with increasing frequency. Word of her teaching background spread quickly, and by Thursday, Eleanor had been formally offered the school position to begin when classes resumed in 2 weeks. The salary was modest but would provide steady income while she built up the dress shop's clientele. By Saturday evening, Eleanor found herself surprisingly nervous as she prepared for the social. She had met many townsfolk during the week, but this would be her first public appearance as Dane Aldridge's companion, and she was acutely aware of the interest their association had generated. Precisely at 7, a knock came at the back door of the shop. Eleanor opened it to find Dane standing there, looking uncharacteristically formal in a clean black suit, white shirt, and string tie. His hair was freshly trimmed, and he'd shaved his usual stubble, revealing a strong jaw and the faint trace of a scar along his left cheek. "You look beautiful," he said simply, his gaze taking in her blue dress with evident appreciation. "Thank you," Eleanor replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "You're quite handsome yourself," Dane offered his arm. "Shall we give them something to really talk about?" The social was held in the town hall, a relatively new building that served for everything from court proceedings to theatrical performances. Tonight, it was decorated with paper lanterns and wildflowers, a small band setting up at one end while tables of food lined the other. Their entrance caused a noticeable lull in conversation before the buzz resumed, louder than before. Eleanor kept her chin up, remembering her Boston training in social graces. "Miss Thornton, over here." Daisy waved enthusiastically from across the room, standing with a group of young people. "Would you like to join them?" Dane asked. "In a moment," Eleanor replied. "First, I'd like to properly greet Reverend and Mrs. Jenkins since they've been kind enough to offer me the teaching position." Dane nodded approvingly. "Smart move. The Jenkinses appreciate proper respect." They made their way to where the minister and his wife stood surveying the gathering with benevolent authority. After exchanging pleasantries and receiving Mrs. Jenkins' scrutiny of her gown, deemed modest yet becoming, Eleanor and Dane circulated among the other attendees. Eleanor was introduced to so many people that their names began to blur together, though she did her best to commit faces and key details to memory. Throughout it all, Dane remained at her side, his presence both reassuring and, she had to admit, thrilling in a way she hadn't expected. When the band began to play, Dane turned to her with a slightly apologetic smile. "I meant what I said about being a poor dancer, but if you're willing to risk your toes." "I would be delighted," Eleanor said, placing her hand in his outstretched one. Despite his warnings, Dane proved a competent if not graceful dancer, guiding her confidently through a waltz. His hand at her waist was warm and steady, and Eleanor found herself increasingly aware of the physical presence of him, the breadth of his shoulders, the faint scent of soap and leather that clung to him, the way his blue eyes seemed to darken when they met hers. "Everyone's watching us," she murmured as they turned. "Let them," Dane replied, his voice low. "I'm only concerned with one person's opinion tonight." The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "And what might that person be thinking?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out," he said with a small smile. "You're not easy to read, Eleanor Thornton." "A necessary skill for a woman alone in the world," she replied, more seriously than she'd intended. His expression softened. "You're not alone here." The simple statement touched her deeply, and Eleanor found herself blinking back unexpected tears. Before she could respond, the dance ended, and they were separated by a rush of new partners. Eleanor claimed by the young bank clerk, and Dane paired with Mrs. Palmer's daughter. Later, as they took a break from dancing to enjoy refreshments, Sheriff Michaels approached their table. "Heard you've been busy getting settled, Miss Thornton," he said genially. "Teaching school and running the dress shop, both that's ambitious." "I enjoy keeping occupied," Eleanor replied with a smile. "Well, you've certainly made an impression," the sheriff continued, glancing between her and Dane with poorly concealed interest. "Fastest integration into town life I've seen since Dane here stopped drifting and bought the livery." "Eleanor has a natural talent for fitting in," Dane said, his tone casual but his eyes watchful. Sheriff Michaels nodded, then lowered his voice. "Word of warning, Dixon's been drinking again tonight. He and Thompson called a truce after their stint in my cells, but Dixon's got a mean streak when he's in his cups. Might want to steer clear." "Noted," Dane said, his posture subtly shifting to alertness. "Thanks, Walter." After the sheriff moved on, Eleanor gave Dane a questioning look. "Should we be concerned?" "Just cautious," Dane replied. "Dixon's mostly bluster, but—" He trailed off as a commotion arose near the entrance. A barrel-chested man with a florid face had staggered in, clearly already intoxicated. He was arguing loudly with a nervous-looking young man trying to calm him. That would be Dixon, Dane said quietly, and his son trying to get him to leave. Reverend Jenkins was already moving toward the disturbance, his wife close behind. The music faltered as attention shifted to the confrontation. "Nobody tells me when I can come or go in my own town," Dixon bellowed, shoving his son aside. His bloodshot gaze swept the room, landing on Eleanor and Dane. "Well, look here, the high and mighty horse trader and his fancy Eastern lady." Dane stood slowly. "That's enough, Dixon. Go home and sleep it off." "Don't you tell me what to do, Aldridge," Dixon snarled, weaving toward them. "Coming in here, acting like you belong, when everybody knows what you really are." Eleanor rose too, her hand finding Dane's arm. "Perhaps we should leave." "No," Dane said firmly. "You have every right to be here." Dixon had reached their table now, the smell of whiskey rolling off him in waves. "You think you're so respectable now, don't you, with your stable and your fine clothes? But I remember what you were before, just another saddled tramp with blood on his hands." A tense silence fell over the gathering. Dane's expression had gone completely still, his body rigid beneath Eleanor's touch. "That's enough, Hiram," Sheriff Michaels intervened, appearing at Dixon's elbow. "You're drunk and causing a scene." "I'm telling the truth," Dixon insisted. "Ask him where he was before he came here. Ask him about Tucson." "I said that's enough," the sheriff repeated, more forcefully. "Your son's going to take you home now, or you'll spend another night in my jail." "Your choice." Dixon glared at Dane, then spat on the floor. "Fine, party's no good anyway." He allowed his son to lead him out, but at the door he turned back. "You watch yourself with that one, miss. He ain't what he seems." After the door closed behind Dixon, conversation slowly resumed, though the festive mood had been dampened. Dane remained silent, his jaw tight. "Would you like to leave?" Eleanor asked quietly. Dane seemed to come back to himself, looking down at her with troubled eyes. "Do you want to?" "I'd understand if you'd rather not be seen with me after that." "Why would I care about the ravings of a drunk?" Eleanor asked. "Unless—" She hesitated. "Is there truth to what he was saying?" Dane's gaze held hers for a long moment before he sighed. "Not here, let's step outside." The night air was cool after the warmth of the hall, stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky. Dane led Eleanor to a bench beneath a cottonwood tree, far enough from the building for privacy. "I should have told you before," he began, his voice low. "There are things in my past that aren't entirely respectable. We all have pasts," Eleanor said, echoing his own words from days earlier. Dane nodded, acknowledging the return. "Mine's darker than most. After the war, I drifted, did work I'm not proud of. Rode with some men who didn't much care about the law." "You were an outlaw?" Eleanor asked, careful to keep judgment from her voice. "Not exactly, more a hired gun." Dane wouldn't meet her eyes now. "I never robbed or stole, but I protected those who did, stood watch. Fought when fighting was needed. And Tucson, what happened there?" Dane was silent for a long moment. "A job went wrong. Bad men hired us to intimidate a shopkeeper who wouldn't sell his land. It was supposed to be just threats, but things escalated. The man died." He finally looked at her, his eyes haunted. "I didn't pull the trigger, but I was there. Could have stopped it, maybe. Didn't." Eleanor absorbed this, trying to reconcile the dangerous past with the man she'd come to know. "What happened after I left that life?" "Wandered north, worked honest jobs, eventually ended up here with enough saved to buy the livery." His voice grew quieter. "Thought I could outrun my past, should have known better." "Does Sheriff Michaels know about Tucson?" Dane nodded. "Walter knows everything. He was a Texas Ranger before he came here. Recognized me from wanted posters, but the case was closed by then. Another man hanged for the murder. Walter agreed to let me stay as long as I kept honest, which I have." They sat in silence for several moments, the muted sounds of the continuing social drifting through the night air. "I understand if you want nothing more to do with me," Dane finally said, his voice carefully neutral. "Your reputation in town is just taking root. Being associated with me might damage it now that Dixon's stirred up old stories." Eleanor considered this. Her new life in Sweetwater Creek was precarious: the teaching position, the slowly building dress shop clientele, the tentative friendships she'd begun to form. Yet the thought of distancing herself from Dane felt wrong, like abandoning someone who'd shown her nothing but kindness. "Mr. Aldridge," she said formally, causing him to look at her with surprise. "I have been taught to judge people by their actions, not their histories. Since my arrival, you have been unfailingly helpful, respectful, and honest when asked directly," she amended with a small smile. "I see no reason to change my opinion of you based on events from years ago." Dane studied her face as if searching for signs of insincerity. "It's not that simple, Eleanor. This is a small town with a long memory. Dixon won't be the last to remind folks of who I was." "Then we shall remind them more frequently of who you are," Eleanor replied with unexpected fierceness. "A respected businessman, a good neighbor, and—" She hesitated, then finished softly, "and a man I am proud to call my friend." Something shifted in Dane's expression, surprise, followed by a warmth that made Eleanor's heart beat faster. "You're an extraordinary woman, Eleanor Thornton." "I am a practical one," she corrected, though she felt anything but practical as his gaze held hers. "Now, shall we return to the social, or would you prefer to escort me home?" "Actually," Dane said, rising and offering his hand, "I thought we might walk a bit first if you're not too tired." "The night's too beautiful to waste." Eleanor placed her hand in his, allowing him to help her up from the bench. "Lead the way, Mr. Aldridge." They walked in companionable silence away from the town hall and down the main street, now quiet except for the distant piano music from the saloon. The moon cast long shadows across the dusty road, and the spring air carried the scent of sage and distant rain. "I used to dream of wide, open spaces like this," Eleanor confessed as they paused at the edge of town, looking out toward the dark silhouettes of distant mountains. "Boston was always so confined, buildings pressing in, people everywhere, even the sky seemed smaller somehow." "And now that you're here," Dane asked, Eleanor considered the question, "it's both more and less than I imagined, more beautiful, more challenging." "Less civilized," she said with a small laugh, "but also less constraining. I feel as though I can breathe properly for the first time." "The West does that to people," Dane agreed. "It's why I could never go back east, even if my past allowed it. Once you've known this kind of freedom, everything else feels like a cage." "Freedom comes with its own costs," Eleanor mused. "Security, certainty, convention. Are those things you miss?" Dane's question was gentle but direct. Eleanor thought of her Boston life, the rigid social structure, the constant worry about appearances, the narrowly defined role she'd been expected to fill. "No," she said with sudden clarity, "I don't believe I do." Dane's hand found hers in the darkness, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "For what it's worth, I think you belong here more than you know." The simple touch sent a current through Eleanor that had nothing to do with the cool night air. She knew she should pull away. They were completely unchaperoned, and despite the West's more relaxed attitudes, there were still boundaries of propriety, but she found herself tightening her grip instead. "Thank you for showing me your Sweetwater Creek," she said softly. "Not just the town, but the real heart of it." "It could be your Sweetwater Creek too," Dane replied, his voice equally quiet. "If you wanted it to be." The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but unmistakable. Eleanor's heart raced as Dane turned to face her, still holding her hand. "Eleanor!" A shout from behind them shattered the moment. They turned to see a figure running toward them from town. "Fire!" the man yelled. "Fire at the dress shop." Eleanor's world tilted, her mind struggling to comprehend the words. "What?" Dane was already moving, pulling her back toward town. "Come on!" They ran together, Eleanor's skirts hampering her pace until she hitched them up without regard for modesty. As they rounded the corner onto the main street, the nightmare came into view, orange flames licking up the front of the dress shop, smoke billowing from the broken display window. A bucket line had already formed, townspeople passing water from the nearby horse trough. Sheriff Michaels was directing efforts, his face grim in the firelight. "The living quarters?" Dane demanded as they reached him, his voice tight with urgency. "Not yet engulfed," the sheriff replied. "Fire started at the front." Deliberate. Somebody threw a burning bottle of whiskey through the window. "Dixon!" Dane growled, his expression hardening. Eleanor stood frozen, watching as her new beginning literally went up in flames. All her aunt's careful work, the patterns, the fabrics, her own meager possessions, everything she had in the world was in that building. "Stay here," Dane told her firmly. "I'm going to help." Before she could protest, he had stripped off his jacket and joined the bucket line, soon moving to the front where men were climbing ladders to pour water directly onto the flames. Hours seemed to pass in a blur of heat, smoke, and desperate activity. The entire town had turned out to fight the fire, women providing fresh buckets, men taking turns at the most dangerous positions. Eleanor found herself working alongside Daisy and Mrs. Palmer, ferrying water from a nearby well when the horse trough ran dry. Finally, as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, Sheriff Michaels called out the words everyone had been praying for. "We've got it contained." The flames had been beaten back, though smoke still rose from the charred timbers. The front of the shop was destroyed, blackened walls, collapsed roof, the interior gutted by fire. But the back portion, including the living quarters, had been saved, though smoke and water damage would be extensive. Eleanor stood across the street, exhaustion making her sway on her feet. Her blue dress was now gray with ash, her face streaked with soot, her hands raw from handling rough bucket ropes. "Eleanor." Dane appeared beside her, his own appearance equally disheveled. A burn marked one forearm where a falling ember had caught him. "Are you all right?" She nodded numbly. "Just trying to comprehend." Dane's expression was grim. "Walter's gone to arrest Dixon. A witness saw him near the shop shortly before the fire started." "What happens now?" Eleanor asked, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. "Now you rest," Dane said firmly. "You can stay at Mrs. Palmer's boarding house. She's already offered a room. Tomorrow we'll assess the damage, see what can be salvaged." "There won't be much," Eleanor said flatly, looking at the ruined shop. "All those beautiful fabrics, the patterns, everything my aunt built." "Buildings can be rebuilt," Dane reminded her gently. "The important thing is you're safe." Eleanor turned to him, reality finally crashing through her shock. "This is my fault." "What? No, it's Dixon's doing, not yours. But it happened because of me, because I was with you." Her voice broke. "Dixon wanted to hurt you through me." Dane's face darkened. "If that's true, then it's my fault, not yours." "It doesn't matter whose fault it is," Eleanor said, a wave of despair washing over her. "The result is the same. I've lost everything. Again." Before Dane could respond, Reverend Jenkins approached, his wife following with a blanket which she promptly wrapped around Eleanor's shoulders. "Miss Thornton, words cannot express our dismay at this terrible act," the minister said gravely. "Please know that the community stands ready to assist you in any way possible." "That's right," Mrs. Jenkins added, patting Eleanor's arm. "We've already begun organizing. The sewing circle will gather this afternoon to see what we can contribute to get you back on your feet." Eleanor managed a grateful nod, though the kindness threatened to break the fragile control she was maintaining over her emotions. "For now, you must rest," Reverend Jenkins continued. "Mrs. Palmer has a room prepared and Dr. Harris will attend you there to ensure you've suffered no ill effects from the smoke." "Thank you," Eleanor said, the words inadequate for the generosity being shown. As the Jenkinses moved away to coordinate further assistance, Eleanor found herself alone with Dane once more. "You should go with Mrs. Palmer," he said quietly. "Get some sleep. Everything looks worse when you're exhausted." "Will I see you later?" Eleanor asked, surprising herself with the question. Something flickered in Dane's eyes, regret, resolve, she couldn't tell which. "I need to speak with Walter about Dixon, and you need time to think, Eleanor, about everything, including whether staying in Sweetwater Creek is still what you want." "You think I should leave?" The idea struck her with unexpected pain. "I think you should consider all your options," Dane replied carefully. "Without complications." He meant himself, Eleanor realized. He was stepping back, giving her space to make a decision untainted by their growing connection. "Dane, rest first," he interrupted gently. "Decisions later." As he walked away, shoulders set with a tension that hadn't been there during their moonlit stroll just hours before, Eleanor felt a hollowness open within her that had nothing to do with the loss of her shop. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. True to their word, the townspeople rallied around Eleanor with remarkable generosity. The damage to her living quarters proved repairable smoke damage primarily, with some water damage to the floors. A team of men led by Reverend Jenkins secured the structure with temporary walls to separate it from the burned-out shop front. Dixon had been arrested and charged not only with arson but with public drunkenness and making threats. His son, mortified by his father's actions, had pledged to cover the costs of rebuilding, though it would mean selling part of their ranch. Through it all, Dane kept a noticeable distance. He contributed to the rebuilding efforts, of course, but always managed to be working in a different area than Eleanor, leaving before she arrived or arriving after she left. When they did cross paths, his manner was polite but reserved, none of the warmth that had been growing between them evident in his brief greetings. By the 5th day after the fire, Eleanor had moved back into her repaired living quarters and was taking stock of what had survived. To her surprise and relief, her aunt's desk had suffered only minor scorching, and the drawer containing the business records and pattern books was largely intact, though smoke damaged. A knock at the back door interrupted her inventory. Eleanor opened it to find Daisy standing there, a determined expression on her normally cheerful face. "This has gone on long enough," Daisy announced without preamble. "You're miserable, Dane's miserable, and the whole town's talking about it." Eleanor blinked, taken aback by the direct approach. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do," Daisy insisted, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "He thinks he's protecting you by staying away, and you're too proud or stubborn to go to him. Meanwhile, I have to watch both of you moping around town like abandoned puppies." "Daisy, it's complicated," Eleanor began. "It really isn't," Daisy countered. "Dixon would have found some excuse to cause trouble eventually, he always does. Using you and Dane as his reason doesn't make it your fault. But if I hadn't come to town, then Maddie's shop would still be empty, our school would be without a teacher come fall, and Dane would still be that quiet, lonely man who keeps to himself except for business." Daisy's expression softened. "Eleanor, in the short time you've been here, you've become important to this town, to people here, including Dane." Eleanor sank into a chair, the exhaustion of the past days catching up with her. "I don't know if I can start over again. The dress shop is destroyed, and while everyone's been incredibly kind, the reality is that rebuilding will take months, even with help." "So," Daisy challenged, "you can still teach, and there are other places to set up a temporary shop until yours is rebuilt, Mrs. Jenkins mentioned just this morning that the old Miller place at the edge of town has a front parlor that would serve nicely, and they're not using it." "Why are you so invested in this?" Eleanor asked, genuinely curious. Daisy's expression turned wistful. "Because Sweetwater Creek needs people who make it better just by being here. You're one of those people, Eleanor, and so is Dane, though he'd never admit it." She paused, then added more softly, "And because I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Eleanor felt her cheeks warm. "He's made it clear he thinks I should consider leaving." "Men say foolish things when they're being noble," Daisy replied with surprising wisdom. "The question is, what do you want, Eleanor?" It was a question she'd been avoiding, focusing instead on the practical matters of recovery and rebuilding. What did she want? Security, yes. Purpose, certainly. But as she allowed herself to really consider the question, she realized those things could be found in many places. What couldn't be replaced was the sense of belonging she'd begun to feel in Sweetwater Creek, the community that had rallied around her in crisis, the children she would soon teach. And Dane complicated, Honorable Dane with his troubled past and kind eyes, who had kept his distance not because he wanted to, but because he thought it best for her. "I want to stay," Eleanor said, the words bringing clarity with them. "This is home now," Daisy beamed. "I was hoping you'd say that. Now, are you going to tell Dane, or shall I?" "I'll tell him," Eleanor said firmly. "But first, I need to make a decision about the dress shop." By the time evening fell, Eleanor had formulated a plan. With Daisy's help, She'd visited the Miller property and found the parlor indeed suitable for a temporary shop. Mrs. Miller, delighted to have the space put to use, had offered it for a nominal rent until Eleanor's own shop could be rebuilt. More importantly, Eleanor had sent a note to Dane asking him to meet her at her place after supper. As she waited nervously, arranging and rearranging the few possessions she'd salvaged from the fire, she rehearsed what she wanted to say. The knock, when it came, was hesitant, so unlike Dane's usual confident manner that Eleanor felt a pang of regret for the distance that had grown between them. She opened the door to find him standing there, hat in hand, his expression carefully neutral. "You wanted to see me?" he asked, remaining on the threshold. "Please come in," Eleanor said, stepping back. Dane entered, his gaze taking in the repaired living space. "They did good work here." "Yes," Eleanor agreed. "Everyone has been incredibly generous." An awkward silence fell, neither quite meeting the other's eyes. "You mentioned decisions in your note," Dane finally said. "Have you decided to return east after all?" "No," Eleanor replied, watching his face carefully. "I've decided to stay." Something flickered in Dane's eyes, relief, perhaps, before his expression became guarded again. "Are you sure that's wise, after what happened?" "What happened was the act of one bitter man, not a reflection on Sweetwater Creek itself," Eleanor said. "The way everyone came together afterward, that's the true measure of this town." "Dixon will be released eventually," Dane pointed out. "His kind holds grudges." "I'm not afraid of Hiram Dixon," Eleanor said firmly, "and I won't let fear dictate my choices." Dane studied her, a hint of admiration breaking through his reserve. "You're a remarkable woman, Eleanor Thornton." "Remarkably stubborn, according to Daisy," she replied with a small smile that drew a brief chuckle from him. "Daisy's not wrong." His expression sobered again. "But my presence in your life is what triggered Dixon's vengeance. It might be better if we maintained some distance." "Is that what you want?" Eleanor asked directly. Dane's composure faltered. "What I want doesn't matter. Your safety, your reputation, those things matter." "You didn't answer my question," Eleanor pressed, taking a step closer to him. "Do you want to stay away from me, Dane?" "No," he admitted, the word emerging rough with emotion. "God help me, it's the last thing I want." "Then don't," Eleanor said simply. Dane shook his head, frustration evident in the set of his shoulders. "It's not that simple, Eleanor. You don't understand what association with me could cost you." "I understand perfectly well," she countered. "I understand that you have a past you're not proud of. I understand that some people will never let you forget it. I understand that being seen with you might raise eyebrows among certain circles." She took another step toward him. "What you don't understand is that I don't care." "You should," Dane insisted. "You're building a new life here, teaching, the dress shop. Those things require community trust." "Trust I've already earned," Eleanor pointed out. "Did you know that 3 different mothers have specifically asked if I'll be teaching their children in the fall? That Mrs. Jenkins has commissioned a new Sunday dress once my shop is operating again. That Reverend Jenkins asked me to join the school board." She smiled softly. "This community has accepted me, Dane, just as they accepted you years ago, despite knowing your past." Dane was silent, his expression conflicted. "You know what my father told me once when I was considering whether to accept a teaching position at a school with a poor reputation?" Eleanor continued. "He said, the opinions that matter come from people who know you, not from those who merely know of you. It was perhaps the wisest thing he ever said to me." "Your father sounds like he was a good man, despite his failings," Dane said quietly. "As are you," Eleanor replied. "A good man, despite your past." Dane's eyes met hers, vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. "You really believe that?" "I do." Eleanor closed the remaining distance between them. "The question is, do you believe it about yourself?" The question hung in the air between them, charged with meaning. Dane's gaze never left hers as he seemed to search for words. "I've spent 5 years trying to outrun who I was," he finally said, "building something honest, something worthwhile. But there are days when I look in the mirror and still see that angry young man who made all the wrong choices." "That's not who I see," Eleanor said softly. "What do you see?" Dane asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor reached up, her hand gently touching his cheek where the faint scar marked his tanned skin. I see a man who helped a stranger in danger, who rebuilt his life through honest work and quiet dignity, who stayed away from me not because he wanted to, but because he thought it was best for me. Her voice grew even softer. I see a man I could love if he'd let me. Dane's breath caught, his hand coming up to cover hers against his face. Eleanor. They called our union a mistake, she whispered, echoing what she'd overheard townsfolk saying after the fire, that her association with Dane had been ill-advised, had led to disaster. Dane's eyes darkened with emotion. Then let it be our best one, he finished, his free arm slipping around her waist to draw her closer. When his lips met hers, Eleanor felt as though the world had shifted beneath her feet. The kiss was gentle at first, almost tentative, but deepened as she responded, her arms winding around his neck. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Dane rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since the night of the social, he confessed. What took you so long? Eleanor teased, her heart so full she thought it might burst. Dane laughed, the sound rich with relief and joy. Stubborn pride, fear, nobility. He kissed her again, briefly. All foolishness, as it turns out. Complete foolishness, Eleanor agreed, unable to stop smiling. Though I admit, I find your nobility rather appealing. Do you now? Dane murmured, his arms tightening around her. What else do you find appealing, Miss Thornton? Eleanor pretended to consider. Your excellent taste in dance partners, your skill with horses. Your remarkable ability to carry trunks without complaint. Is that all? Dane asked, his eyes dancing with amusement. Not remotely, Eleanor replied more seriously. But we have time for me to create a complete list, don't we? All the time in the world, Dane promised, sealing the words with another kiss. Summer faded into autumn, and Sweetwater Creek blossomed with the changes that had come to the small frontier town. The dress shop had been rebuilt by September, grander than before, with large display windows and a proper fitting room added to the design. Next door, Dane's livery stable had expanded to include a carriage house and blacksmith shop, employing 2 young men from neighboring ranches. Most significant to the townsfolk, however, was the change in Dane Aldridge himself. The once reserved horseman now smiled freely, tipped his hat to ladies on the street, and had even been persuaded to join the town council. The cause of this transformation was no mystery to anyone that walked beside him every Sunday to church, taught the town's children with patience and enthusiasm, and had single-handedly revolutionized the quality of ladies' fashion in 3 counties. On a crisp October afternoon, as golden leaves drifted past the newly painted sign reading Thornton's Dress Emporium, Eleanor was putting the finishing touches on a wedding gown for the banker's daughter when the back door opened. Not a step further. She called without looking up from her careful stitching. This is bad luck, Dane's chuckle reached her from the doorway. I believe that only applies if I were the groom, which, thankfully for Miss Sophia, I am not. Eleanor set aside her needle and turned to greet him with a warm smile. You're early. I wasn't expecting you until supper. Finished breaking that new stallion sooner than expected, Dane said, crossing to her and dropping a kiss on her forehead. Thought I'd see if my favorite dressmaker was available for a ride. A ride. Eleanor repeated, glancing at the work still spread across her table. Dane, I have fittings scheduled in an hour, and this gown must be ready for final approval tomorrow. Fittings have been rescheduled, Dane replied, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Mrs. Jenkins was most accommodating when I explained the situation. What situation? Eleanor asked suspiciously. Dane Aldridge, what are you planning? You'll have to come with me to find out, he replied, offering his hand. Do you trust me, Eleanor Thornton? The question, asked playfully, nevertheless carried the weight of their journey together, from strangers diving for cover from gunfire, to allies rebuilding after disaster, to lovers building a future neither had imagined possible. With my life, Eleanor answered simply, placing her hand in his. Outside, 2 horses waited, Dane's sturdy bay gelding and Eleanor's pretty gray mare, a gift from him on her birthday in August. She had become a competent rider under his patient instruction, though she still preferred side saddle for longer journeys. They rode out of town toward the west, following a trail that wound through stands of cottonwood trees now blazing with autumn colors. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the rolling landscape, and in the distance, the mountains stood purple against the clear blue sky. "Are you going to tell me where we're going?" Eleanor asked as they crested a small rise. "You'll see," Dane replied, his expression uncharacteristically nervous beneath his usual confidence. 20 minutes later, they rounded a bend in the trail, and Eleanor gasped. Before them lay a small clearing beside a bubbling creek where a blanket had been spread beneath a towering cottonwood. A picnic basket waited there, alongside a bottle nestled in what appeared to be a bucket of creek water to keep it cool. "Dane." Eleanor breathed, taking in the scene. "It's lovely." He helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist. "This is where I came when I first arrived in Sweetwater Creek," he explained, leading her to the blanket. "I was tired, nearly broke, and not sure if I was running towards something or away from something." Eleanor settled on the blanket, arranging her riding skirt around her. "What made you decide to stay this place?" Dane said, gesturing to the creek and the sheltering trees. It felt peaceful, like somewhere a man could catch his breath and start again. He sat beside her, reaching for the bottle, not whiskey, Eleanor noted, but a sparkling cider from the orchard outside town. "It reminds me of a place my father used to take me as a child," Eleanor said softly. "There was a stream behind our summer cottage where I would spend hours reading under a willow tree." Dane poured 2 glasses of cider, handing her one. "To peaceful places," he toasted. "And new beginnings," Eleanor added, touching her glass to his. They enjoyed the simple picnic. Dane had prepared cold chicken, fresh bread from Mrs. Palmer's cafe, apple tarts, and late-season berries. As they ate, they spoke of town matters, of Eleanor's students' progress, of Dane's plans for expanding the livery business further. When they had finished, Dane grew quiet, his expression turning serious. "Eleanor," he began, then paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "These past months have been the happiest of my life." "Mine too," she said softly, reaching for his hand. "When I came to Sweetwater Creek 5 years ago, I thought the best I could hope for was a quiet life, honest work, and perhaps eventually the respect of my neighbors." Dane's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "I never dared dream of more, never thought I deserved more." Eleanor felt her heart quicken at the intensity in his blue eyes. "Then you arrived," Dane continued, "with your Boston manners and your courage and your complete disregard for what others might think of associating with a man like me." A smile touched his lips. "You turned my quiet life upside down in the best possible way. As I recall, you were the one who pulled me behind that water trough," Eleanor reminded him, her own voice slightly unsteady. "My life has been upside down ever since." Dane chuckled, then grew serious again. "What I'm trying to say, not very eloquently, is that I can't imagine my life without you in it." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box, "and I'm hoping I won't have to." Eleanor's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond flanked by tiny sapphires. "Eleanor Thornton, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Dane asked, his voice rough with emotion. Tears sprang to Eleanor's eyes as joy bloomed within her chest. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly, "yes, Dane Aldridge, I would be proud to be your wife." His hands trembled slightly as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms for a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. When they finally broke apart, Eleanor rested her head against his chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart. "Do you think your past self would believe this moment was possible?" she asked. Dane's laugh rumbled beneath her ear. "Not for a second. That angry young man couldn't imagine deserving someone like you." Eleanor lifted her head to meet his gaze. "And now?" "Now," Dane said softly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, "I know better than to argue with a determined schoolteacher about what I do or don't deserve." "A wise decision," Eleanor agreed with a smile. Because I intend to spend the rest of my life showing you exactly how deserving you are of love, respect, and happiness. The rest of our lives, Dane corrected, kissing her again, our best mistake, remember. As the afternoon sun filtered through the golden leaves above them, casting dappled light across their intertwined figures, Eleanor knew with absolute certainty that she had found her home not in the rebuilt dress shop, not in the schoolhouse where she taught, but here in Dane's arms, in this community that had embraced them both despite their unconventional beginnings. Our very best one, she agreed, her heart full with the promise of all the days to come. They were married on Christmas Day, 1878, in the small church decorated with evergreens and red ribbons. Snow had fallen the night before, turning Sweetwater Creek into a winter wonderland that seemed designed specifically for the occasion. Eleanor wore a gown of her own creation, ivory silk with delicate lace she'd ordered specially from San Francisco, while Dane cut a handsome figure in a new black suit, his usual Stetson replaced with a formal top hat for the ceremony. The entire town turned out for the event, even Hiram Dixon, now released from jail and notably sober, who offered a gruff but seemingly sincere apology during the reception held at the town hall. "Never thought I'd see the day Aldridge settled down," Sheriff Michaels commented as he congratulated the couple. "You've worked a miracle, Mrs. Aldridge." "No miracle," Eleanor replied, squeezing Dane's hand. "Just the recognition of something that was meant to be, despite what others might have thought." As they danced their first waltz as husband and wife, Dane pulled her close and whispered, "They called our union a mistake." "Then it's our best one," Eleanor whispered back, completing what had become their private motto. Under the approving eyes of their friends and neighbors, they began their married life, not just a new chapter for them both, but the start of a legacy that would shape Sweetwater Creek for generations to come. By 1880, the Aldridge name had become synonymous with the growing prosperity of the town. The livery had expanded to include a successful horse breeding operation, with Dane's skilled eye for horseflesh drawing buyers from as far away as California. Eleanor continued to teach while managing her thriving dress shop, now employing 3 seamstresses including Daisy Miller, who had discovered an unexpected talent for design. That spring brought their greatest joy, the birth of their daughter, Catherine, followed 2 years later by their son, James. Their home, built on land just outside town where the creek curved beneath cottonwood trees, became a center of community gatherings and a haven for those in need. As the years passed and Sweetwater Creek grew from frontier settlement to proper town with the arrival of the railroad, the story of the Boston schoolteacher and the reformed gunman became something of a local legend, proof that second chances and new beginnings were possible for anyone brave enough to seize them. And on quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the day's work was done, Dane and Eleanor would often sit together on their porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. "Do you ever regret it?" Dane asked once, on the 10th anniversary of their first meeting. "Coming west, staying in Sweetwater Creek after the fire, marrying a man with my history?" Eleanor's answer was the same as it had been every time he'd asked a variation of this question over the years. She leaned over and kissed him softly, the love between them only deepened by the passing of time. "Not for a single moment," she said. "It may have begun as our best mistake, but it has become our greatest blessing." And as they sat hand in hand, watching the stars emerge in the vast western sky, both knew with absolute certainty that they were exactly where they were meant to be together, against all odds, writing their own story in the wild landscape that had given them both a second chance at life, at purpose, and at love that would endure through all the seasons of their lives.